Welcome to another enlightening episode of Shinny Truth, the show where inherited wisdom meets today's pressing questions. I'm your host, Sarah Thompson, and today we delve into a profound concept from Ghanaian scholar Kofi Asare Opoku that African indigenous spirituality carries a skinny but imperishable truth essential for Africa's regeneration. As we embark on this journey, let's start with a captivating Swahili proverb. It is not necessary to blow out another person's lantern for yours to shine. This image of a lantern perfectly encapsulates the essence of Africa's religious heritage. For centuries, this lantern has been deliberately dimmed by forces such as missionaries and colonizers, and sadly, by some Africans themselves, internalizing the belief that their own traditions were inferior. Christianity and Islam, which Opoku calls guest religions, were often presented as the only legitimate paths to God, while indigenous beliefs were dismissed as mere fetishism or paganism, seen as doomed to fade away. However, as Opoku insists, even if the African tradition has been considered voiceless, it has not gone out. The truth, though skinny, still endures. Let's unpack this idea of skinny but imperishable truth. This phrase comes from an African proverb suggesting that while truth may become skinny, it will never perish. Or in simpler terms, even if your understanding is minimal, the truth still exists and is powerful. In his work, Opoku applies this to Africa's religious heritage, asserting that although it has been marginalized and misrepresented, it still holds crucial perspectives on God, humanity, and community. It's like a precious fruit that has been kept behind closed doors, yet it still exists and can be nurtured to flourish again. Missionaries described Africa as a blank religious slate, or tabula rasa, to be rewritten with imported doctrines. This assumption led to a church that spoke in monotone, ignoring the rich, vibrant dialogue present within local spiritual landscapes. Many African Christians have internalized a sense of contempt for their own symbols, proverbs, and stories. So what does this supposedly skinny tradition actually teach us? Opoku describes African spirituality as a way of life interwoven with culture, rather than a strict system of dogmas. Think of it as more of a community practice, rather than just a timeline of doctrines. At its core, African spirituality is built on the conviction that every human being possesses a divine spark, living in direct relationship with the Creator. This relationship is often represented by names like originator or the very source of being, emphasizing a personal connection to the divine beyond the walls of a church or temple. What's fascinating is that African religions typically do not have temples dedicated solely to the supreme being, nor do they have a priesthood that monopolizes access to the divine. Instead, every individual can forge their path to the Great Spirit. This belief system promotes an idea that many African traditions affirm. All human beings are children of God. None is a child of the earth. There's no theology depicting Africans as inherently depraved or broken, instead encouraging the understanding that they can act as creators of societies and civilizations. Now let's talk about some key concepts that capture what it means to be fully human, like Ubuntu and Iwa. These terms reflect ideals of good character, compassion, and the deep insight that a person is a person through other persons. It's about interdependence and relationships. Living ethically, according to Opoku, is realized through these concepts. One becomes a real person by engaging in solidarity, practicing hospitality, and recognizing their dignity in relation to God, others, and the natural world. Ubuntu, in particular, carries a significant historical weight. For instance, during South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, Ubuntu was pivotal in fostering forgiveness and community healing, steering away from revenge. We often hear about the need for ecological awareness in today's world, and here's where the African spiritual heritage shines. Traditionally, African views see humans as part of nature, not its masters. Rituals and care towards animals, rivers, and forests are expressions of moral relationships with the environment, reflecting respect rather than dominion. Opoku points out that what was once decried as nature worship could actually serve as a wise ecological ethic today, especially as we face climate change and environmental crises. Think about that. The African mind perceives traces of the divine within nature, feeling a duty to care for it rather than exploit it. This shimmering view of nature being fundamentally good echoes in proverbs that affirm how every creation by the Creator is good. This invites respect rather than a mindset of domination. On an interesting note regarding inclusivity, one key feature of the African religious heritage is its theological humility. Opoku likens the truth to a baobab tree too large for any single person's arms to encircle. Instead, many must come together to grasp its trueness. This humility fosters openness. African communities can create their own answers to life's meanings while still respecting insights from other spiritual paths. Wisdom can originate from multiple viewpoints. That's how community learning thrives. This openness explains how Christianity and Islam could spread so widely across the African continent. People recognized shared elements between guest religions and the wisdom present in their own heritage, perceiving them not as replacements, but additions to the same divine reality. Now, given such a rich heritage, you might ask, why has there been internalized racism and self-hatred? Over time, many Africans began to view European culture and religion affectionately, often through a painful lens shaped by colonialism. The dominance of European imagery, like white depictions of Jesus or demonization of African religious symbols, further entrenches a cycle of internalized oppression. It's as if Africans are blowing out their own lanterns, convinced that the borrowed light is the only true light. Opoku warns that regeneration cannot be achieved by relying on borrowed spiritual capital. As Proverbs illustrate, societies cannot live authentic lives clad in other people's clothing. They must rediscover and trust in the profound depth of their own inherited wisdom. Importantly, Opoku isn't calling for the abandonment of Christianity or Islam. He uses the metaphor of cooking on two stones of the hearth to illustrate how African spirituality and adopted faiths can work harmoniously together. The point isn't to romanticize the past, but to allow ancestral heritage to shape contemporary faith practices. It emphasizes recognizing African religious traditions as legitimate parts of the spiritual landscape, rather than relics to be erased. Understanding this dynamic is key to realizing that African societies can interpret the world without viewing themselves as blank slates, engaging with other religions while anchoring their perspectives firmly in their own traditions. As we draw this episode to a close, the challenge that Opoku issues comes into focus. He argues that this generation carries the task of showcasing the African way of perceiving the world, asserting its own integrity and providing a rich perspective for interpreting human experience. Ultimately, the message resonates far beyond the African context. It's a reminder to recognize and cherish the wisdom that exists within us all, inviting us to blend our histories with the present. Thank you for tuning in to Shini Truth. We hope you take these reflections on African spirituality and carry them forth in your own lives, illuminating your path with both ancestral wisdom and contemporary insights. Until next time, remember that wisdom isn't just a luxury, it's a necessity we cultivate together, illuminating the way for future generations.